Today we'll be taking a look at one of the most fearsome Inquisitors around, and that's Inquisitor Coteaz. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Now the Inquisition got some new updated rules fairly recently, in a copy of White Dwarf, where they received updated rules, stratagems, warlord traits, psychic powers and relics. I did cover this when it came out at the time, but unfortunately got a bit distracted with other projects, so didn't give them quite as much coverage as I would have liked to. Out of the new rules, Inquisitor Coteaz shook out to be one of the strongest models in the faction. So today we'll take a quick look at his datasheet, any obvious combos and synergies, and some ways that you could think about adding Coteaz to your army. In the background, Torquemada Coteaz is a puritanical Inquisitor who controls a vast spy network across the Formosa sector. Many of the planetary defence forces and other Imperial servants are as much Coteaz's sworn men as they are their commanders, and report to him as an early warning system should any traces of heresy emerge in the planets that he protects. Unlike many Ordo Malleus Inquisitors, Coteaz refuses to entertain the notion of using the power of the warp against itself, and dabble in forbidden arts to increase his own personal power, or prolong his life, which is an increasingly pertinent issue, as Coteaz is not a young man anymore, and none of his acolytes have shown the necessary drive and determination to succeed him. The temptation to allow himself to utilise the power of the warp to extend his own life, to prevent his great work from slipping into chaos, is a temptation that grows stronger every day. On the battlefield he takes to war with a Nemesis Demon Hammer, a suit of Artificer armour, and a Cyber Eagle, which he uses to track down his heretical quarry. So let's take a look at how he performs on the tabletop. So Coteaz is an HQ choice for Codex Inquisition, meaning that you can add him just as a random include in your army, and he won't break any detachment's specific special rules, such as the Space Marines combat doctrines. Alternatively, you can field him in an Inquisitorial detachment if he wants to have some of his acolytes on the tabletop as well. Coteaz will set you back 90 points, so a reasonably cheap HQ choice, and he's got a bit of a boosted profile above the standard Inquisitor. He's movement 6, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3 up, strength and toughness 3, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 10 and a 2 up save. So decently durable with a 2 up armor save, and quite a strong profile in close combat, though strength and toughness 3 do hamper him a little. That leadership 10 will be particularly handy with his Authority of the Inquisition rule, which means that any Imperial units within 6 inches of him can use that leadership instead of their own. So if you ever have leadership problems in your army, then Coteaz could certainly be an asset. He is armed with a bolt pistol, a Cyber Eagle, and a mastercrafted Nemesis Demon Hammer. The mastercrafted Demon Hammer is basically a regular Nemesis Demon Hammer that doesn't have the -1 to hit penalty. It's strength times 2, so he'll be strength 6 when using it, AP -3, and damage 3. That Cyber Eagle is essentially a 24-inch range assault D6 bolt gun that's fired in the shooting phase. I guess this represents him sending off his eagle to claw out the eyes of his enemies or something, which is quite fun. As with all Inquisitors, he has the Quarry special rule, and he's an Ordo Malleus Inquisitor. This means that he can reroll the hit and wound roll when he's making any attacks against Chaos or Demons. This means that his close combat and Cyber Eagle are going to be exceptionally more dangerous whenever he's fighting the forces of Chaos, which won't be every game in a take-all-comers scenario, but in the matches where it counts, it is a massive buff. So I think I misspoke earlier when I said it was the Authority of the Inquisition that gives that 6-inch leadership bubble. That's his unquestionable Wisdom special rule that's listed on this datasheet. Authority of the Inquisition is actually the rule that allows him to embark on any Imperial transports, such as Space Marine Rhinos or drop pods, provided there are no other restrictions, such as, for example, not being able to get on a transport unless he has the Primaris keyword, meaning that he's not going to be riding in repulsors or impulsors. He has a few other special rules. First of all, he has a Refractor field for a 5 up invul save, which could come in handy once in a while against very high AP weapons. And he has his Spy network, which has 2 abilities. First of all, and probably most important, is that when an enemy unit is set up on the table from reinforcements, so say they're using a special rule to deep strike or infiltrate somehow, then you have the option to select an Ordo Malleus unit within 6 inches of Inquisitor Coteaz. That unit can immediately shoot at the unit as if it were the shooting phase. Now this is a very powerful ability for a few reasons. Firstly, it doesn't have a range, meaning that you can apply this every single time an enemy unit comes on from reserve, wherever they are on the board. Now almost every single Inquisition unit only has 24-inch range, so that is going to hamper things. However, there is a certain Land Raider that has longer range, and also the Inquisition keyword, and this thing packs 2 quad heavy bolters, meaning that if you have both this and Coteaz on the table, every single time an enemy unit gets set up within 36 inches of the Land Raider, you just get to shoot it with 8 heavy bolters for free. This, to put it lightly, might influence where your opponent sets up their models. I was honestly fairly sure that Games Workshop would have FAQ'd this out of existence fairly soon after the Inquisition index dropped, but they don't appear to have yet, so it seems to be very much legal in games of 40k at the moment, although it does shoehorn you into getting some very specific models. If there's any reason why that combo doesn't work anymore, please let me know, but it appears that they both have all the relevant keywords as far as I can tell. Other than that, his interceptability could be good on a unit of several acolytes with plasma guns, perhaps just a random Jakiro with him, or a random acolyte with a plasma gun that can't be shot due to being a character, or if you are just including him as an ally to your army, then you just get some random free Cyber Eagle attacks on whichever unit's coming in, which certainly isn't bad if you get it for free. The Spy Network rule has a second part, which is a special rule when your opponent uses a stratagem. Once per battle, you can say you must use an additional command point to use that stratagem, otherwise the stratagem has no effect and can't be played again this phase. I'd say that the 2 main best uses of this are either to use early on a key stratagem, just to make them pay another command point and drain their command point pool a little, or you could save it towards the end of the game, where perhaps they only have a few command points left, and you can stop them from using a vital stratagem if they don't have enough command points to do it once you've factored in this rule. It's not enormously game changing either way, but it's certainly another little nice to have. Finally, Coteaz is a Psyker, and he can cast 2 powers in your Psychic phase and attempts to deny 1 power in your opponent's Psychic phase. However, his power knowledge is limited. He only knows Smite and 1 power from the Telesthesia discipline, so under normal circumstances he's going to be smiting and casting that 1 power. So he's basically locked into smiting every single turn. Don't get me wrong, Smite is absolutely fine, but it does prevent him from being quite as much a dedicated buffing machine as some of the other options, particularly the Forge World Inquisitor Hector Rex, who knows and can deny a whole ton of psychic powers. So overall, Coteaz is really quite a good all-round Inquisitor. Decent melee, decent survivability, reasonable shooting compared with some of them, knows 2 psychic powers, better leadership, his command point shenanigans, and his potentially devastating interceptability. That's really quite a lot of utility that you're getting for 90 points. So let's see some of the ways that we can get the best out of him. Firstly, his Warlord trait is locked to being the Ordo Malleus specific one, which is Psychic Mastery. Fortunately, this is pretty much arguably the best Warlord trait in the Inquisition Codex, as it means that he will be able to know 1 power, cast 1 power, and deny 1 more power, more than he would before. So this guy's going to have 3 casts per turn, 2 Telesthesia ones, and 1 Smite cast. And the best thing is that you don't even have to make him your Warlord, because you can use the stratagem Inquisitorial Mandate for 1 command point to access that trait, even if he isn't your named Warlord. I'd say that this is almost always going to be worth it. Having an extra psychic power and a deny on the go all game long is typically going to be a good move. Next, let's take a quick look at his psychic power options. Most of them are very useful in Codex Inquisition. Telesthesia is a good discipline. If we are taking that Warlord trait with a stratagem, he's going to have the choice of any 2 of these 7 powers. There's Terrify, which is -1 leadership and can't overwatch for an enemy unit. Potentially great if you're thinking about charging something with decent shooting. Psychic Fortitude, a cheap warp charge 4 power that makes an Imperium unit immune to morale. Probably best used on something like an enormous squad of conscripts. There's Dominate, the 12-inch range warp charge 6 power that has the potential to take control of a enemy model and use its guns on your opponent. This one's easily defeated by your opponent putting their models too close together, but if you catch them unawares and get to take control of a powerful weapon, this can be hilariously destructive. Mental Interrogation is a 12-inch range attack that you can only target on an enemy character model. It'll give them -1 to hit, and also if you beat their leadership on a 3d6 roll, you'll get a command point, so potentially quite a good reward for getting that one off. Psychic Pursuit is another very strong power. This one you target on an enemy character within 18 inches that's got a wounds characteristic of less than 10. Until the start of your next shooting phase, friendly Ordo Malleus units around him can target that character even if he's not the closest. This is another good potential trick with everyone's favourite Land Raider Prometheus, or perhaps a huge squad of plasma gun acolytes to fry a character that wasn't expecting to be fried. So that's another good reason why he synergizes well with decent shooting units. Castigation is Warp Charge 6, and this is sort of a targeted smite. It's 18 inches, roll 3d6, and if it beats the leadership they take d3 mortal wounds. Could again be good for finishing off the last few wounds off an enemy character, and turns him into quite a good mortal wound generation machine. If he's potentially casting this and smite each turn, then you could be getting anywhere between 2 and 6 mortal wounds off every single turn. Finally, we have Knowledge Through Power, which is a very useful and generic buff that's only available to Ordo Malleus. It's Warp Charge 6 and can give one of your friendly units a 5-up invul save, so particularly good on things like big units of guard conscripts, biker models that don't have invul saves, elite choices that aren't very tough, such as maybe Blood Angels Death Company, or maybe Space Marine Aggressors. There's a lot of units that will happily have a 5-up invul save, and this will greatly increase their survivability. Overall, I think that almost any of these could be used in the right army. If one of them synergizes very well with the units that you're bringing, obviously it makes it a good pick, but as under normal circumstances you don't have to declare psychic powers on your army list, you're typically allowed to see the opponent's list and choose which powers that you're going to be using in that game. Say if they had a lot of advancing characters, you might think about using Mental Interrogation and Psychic Pursuit. In terms of synergy with other Inquisition units, we've already mentioned that this guy absolutely loves being around the biggest, shootiest units in the Inquisition Codex. If you are taking him in an Inquisition detachment, I'd certainly consider anything from just a Jacairo to a big squad of Plasma Acolytes, all the way up to the Land Raider Prometheus, if you are going on full cheese alert. Quite a lot of armies in 40k use some sort of reserve style unit to come in to deal damage to your army, and being able to shoot them with a powerful unit before that happens could potentially be very powerful, or perhaps just force your opponent to set them up in a suboptimal position. In terms of stratagems, there are a few potential Inquisition ones he can use. Inquisitorial Mandate, we've already mentioned, is the one to get him an extra Warlord trait. Seize for Interrogation could potentially be useful. This is one where if an enemy character dies within 3 inches of Coteaz, so as that costs 1 command point you'll gain anywhere between 0 and 2. And Coteaz doesn't have a bad fighting profile, so between that and Smite there is a reasonable chance that you could opportunistically kill a character. Requisition could give you a 1 command point, reroll 1's aura if you're fighting against Chaos or Demons, and Cyclonic Torpedo is the 4 command point one that gives you a big mortal wounds blast that could occasionally be useful if your opponent has loads and loads of small elite units all clustered up together. In game, the use of Coteaz really depends on what sort of army you're adding him to. I'd say to get the most use out of most of his abilities, he's probably best off being on foot as part of an advancing gun line. This way you have a good chance of being able to use Smite, his Cyber Eagle attacks, and his close combat abilities, and he can hand out his Leadership 10 and any other buffing psychic powers to other advancing units in your army. From there you have the choice whether or not to include him as a lone Inquisitor or a full Inquisitorial detachment. I do think he is one of the best choices to lead a full Inquisitorial detachment, due to his good synergy with the other units, but he is absolutely justifiable just as a 90 points cheap investment all on his own that doesn't eat a detachment slot. Either way, I think Coteaz is a really solid pick. You really can use him in multiple ways in multiple games, whether you're primarily having him there for that massive deep strike bubble of devastation with the Land Raider Prometheus, if you're just mainly using him to throw out a whole bunch of mortal wounds and everything else is a bonus, or you're using some of the very useful telesthesia powers to buff your other units by giving them 5-up invul saves and ignoring Overwatch. All of these options are pretty solid, and in the right circumstances could easily be worth the points that you've invested in him. In terms of his competitors within the Inquisition Codex, probably the nearest in choice to his psychic abilities would be the Forge World Inquisitor Hector Rex, who as we mentioned can cast 3 per turn, and they can all be telesthesia powers if needed. He's a few more points, but he can also deep strike, which makes it very useful for him trying to get his buffs where they need to be. On the other side, you could have Greyfax for better denials, or Eisenhorn for his own unique rules. Coteaz certainly brings things to the table that pretty much no other 40k model can do, however, and I personally argue that he's probably the strongest Inquisitor in terms of points for points out of the whole index at the moment. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, particularly if you've managed to use this guy successfully in a game for your army. If I've misunderstood any of the rules interactions, please let me know again. It can always be a little bit sketchy when you're dealing with marrying up White Dwarf, the core rule set, and Forge World datasheets, so if I've got anything wrong then I do apologise. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more content like this, and let me know if you'd like to hear any more Inquisition reviews. I have a Patreon page, so feel free to support that if you are finding my content helpful. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.